Okay, so this is really great. Now we're going to continue on talking as far as with the blended family. But however, now we see there's another scenario that's being created because we see that there's not an order between Abraham, Sarah, well, I should say Abram, okay, and Sarah, and then we see Hagar. So with the adults in this situation, a scenario is being created here that's really kind of dysfunctional, if you allow me to say it that way. Because now we're seeing, now the children are going to get involved with this here, and their thinking is going to be, different and something that they're not seeing order. So let's talk about that. Okay?
Yes. So, again, it comes back to the foundation of marriage, so God created marriage and the threefold cord of, the husband, Jesus, and the wife. The children are given to us by the Lord as a temporary assignment. They're an amazing blessing, but a temporary assignment to train them up so they can go and, we demonstrate marriage and how to do life God's way, for them to go out and live that way as well. So, in the scripture, it says in Matthew 19:5, so this foundation for this man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And, so as the husband and wife, that foundation, with, like I said, the threefold cord with Jesus in the center of it all, we're to demonstrate this to our children so that they can succeed. So if they don't see a healthy marriage, how are they going to be able to have a healthy marriage in their life down the road? So, one of the key things with it is that the children cannot come with God's order. The children cannot come before the marriage. So obviously we know God's order, it's God, the spouse, and then the children. And when the children see that you're having a godly, healthy, happy marriage, that gives them security. And, that we're creating also a vision for them, for their future marriages. One of the core things also in that is the husband and wife having a united front for the children. That's that they make, as husband and wife, you make all the decisions together. And that there isn't, because sometimes you're both coming in with children. So it isn't, obviously favoring any of the children over the other. So as husband and wife, we're one, but as a family, we're also one. So, with not favoring the children, treating them all the same, they're God's children's first. And, He gives us the responsibility of training them up in the Lord. So, as we're one and the family is one, and not for the purpose, that the non-biological parent is trying to replace the biological parent in any way, but that we're, taking our place as parents and taking responsibility as husband and wife and parents in your home and taking your responsibility seriously. So, the priority with some of these principles, the priority, God's spouse, your children, and then the pursuit that, we pursue God, we pursue our spouse, but we're also going to pursue the children, that I'm going to work hard, I'm going to work in this relationship, and I'm going to work in this relationship with you to have a healthy, happy relationship, with the spouse, with your spouse, with the children. When we keep our eyes focused on Jesus, and we put these principles, godly principles in place, we can have a very flourishing, blended family. Like I said, a family, we're all one family. And it's just keeping that foundation and that focus on Jesus and applying these principles and keeping the marriage, as the second to God. So I think those things, that's the setup, to everything else that's going to come your way in a blended family, just like in a non-blended family. It's that foundation.
I have a question. So, in this, should there be where the the mother and the father should be looking, because it's all about building the kingdom, like you're pointing out. So should we be focusing in on maybe trying to find, because one of you mentioned earlier about everything being a gift, children are a gift.
Right.
So you're looking at the area of that gift that could help this family present what it's supposed to bring to God.
Right.
And
Yes.
so each one,
Purpose.
yeah,
Purpose,
each one,
yes.
is have something to bring.
Right.
So all of them are coming. It's just like the offering that God received basically from, Abel. He wanted Cain to bring, a better gift,
Right.
and maybe if Adam and Eve could have maybe stepped in to say, hey, this is what God is expecting of you.
Right.
And as parents, that's what we have to do. We have
Right.
to step in and say, okay, you're looking for that gift because you're coming together as a kingdom family, as a unit.
Yes.
Because that's how the tribes that came together, they were a unit. And that's how the families were operated, they were a unit. So each unit comes together to say, all right, we're helping build God's kingdom.
Right.
We're joining this family and that family, and everyone is coming together. So I think that when you brought up about the part about the gift,
Right.
that's where we can have the insight to help nurture that gift that each child has.
Absolutely.
Because each one is going to be different.
Right. They all
But
bring
if
something
you're coming together as a unit to say, hey, this is what we're going to present to
Right.
God.
Yes.
Well,
It's beautiful.
that was a really good point because it's just as you brought up with Ishmael. And God still had a blessing on his life.
Right.
And so when you really look at that dynamic, it's one of those things that you say, okay, well, if the adults could have worked things out, how would that have benefited the kingdom so much
Right.
more, right?
Right.
So, you look at just that, because he now would be bringing that to the table. And instead, it was used to divide,
Right.
like you said, whereas it could have had a different outcome if, the adults and the parents could have worked things out in a different way.
Right.
Yes.
So that is a point on that. But one thing that I got from what you're saying is, again, we talked about this, I believe, in the first and second portion about, how important order is and the respect factor,
Yes.
right? So I think for the parenting roles, as our children see us respecting one another, that respect is built by what they see.
Yes.
So that is a very, very important, I feel, foundation for blended families, because having that respect in place, it really creates that unit that
Right.
you're talking about.
Yes, that oneness.
If there's no, exactly, oneness, if there's no separation, there's the respect that I have for you, whoever's kids that are coming into it, it's like, well, obviously my mother really loves and cares for him because the respect that she gives him, vice versa.
Right.
And when you feel that within the home, that's what creates that bond and unity between everyone, right? Because then
Yes.
even the children respect one another.
Right.
Whether it's their differences, whether you have adult children. I know at one point we had a question that came across about adult children coming together as a family, and that's one thing that we've discussed before, that when you have young children, blending makes sense.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
you have adult children, a lot of times it doesn't get to the point of blending.
Right.
They have, their set ways in what they're doing,
Mhm.
and it's just about a respect factor of
Right.
everybody coming together
Yeah.
and respecting one another to say, hey, this is where I'm at in my life, this
Right.
is what I went through, and that communication, when you look at it from that dynamic, it really flows from the top
Mhm.
down.
Yeah.
So if the communication at the top, falls into those lines of division,
Mhm.
it will do the same thing in the end, right?
Let me just inject something on that part, because see, what happens is that we just think a lot of times that these things are just going to haphazardly work out.
Right.
that they're just
That's-
gonna
To be
automatically,
intentional.
and, well, it would help if we would deal with the hard questions that
Right.
would come up
Yes,
Yeah.
in those type of, in the relationship.
yes.
And that way you're dealing with it face on, because this way a child is not going back off and into their mind or their den and begin to think differently. Because what happens is that it can start happening even from the teenage
Yeah.
years.
Yes.
So this way you can bring everything to the table. But a lot of times we don't want to talk
Yeah.
about those things.
Face
Yeah.
things,
You
yes.
know. And but those are issues. Those are real issues
Right,
that we really have to deal with.
right.
And I believe that if you do not deal with them, they're not going to go away. They'll go away for a small period of time.
Yeah,
But
you can't
eventually,
change
right.
what you don't deal with.
Right.
Yeah.
And right.
Right,
But eventually they're going to resurface,
right.
and sometimes it's not the best situation
Right.
when it happens.
And that's where freedom and healing is, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
you know, being able to talk about those hard things, and,
Yep.
you know, that's just where all that takes place, and then now you are able to, make the changes, you know,
Right.
facing it and not shoving it under the rug, and being able to.
You're not dressing it up.
Right,
You're
exactly.
not dressing it up,
Yes.
because I feel that a lot of times we, in the Christian faith, a lot of times we dress
Yes.
things up, and we
Yes.
don't want to deal with them.
Right.
We'll just say, well, we'll just give it over to God. Well,
Put a
yeah,
mask on.
but God is saying, hey, you know, I'm giving you the ability,
Yes.
you know, study, as Mike
Right,
said,
yeah,
study
study, yeah.
that word to show
Yes.
that's something to
Yes.
approve, a workman that
Yes.
needs not be ashamed. But study, you know, we live in an information age,
Mhm.
but I feel as though as the kingdom, we're in the age of understanding. So this is why we're bringing this here. This is not cookie cutter at all.
No.
This is raw. We're talking about real situations, because many people are going to say, you know what, you know, we didn't deal with this here, and look what happened.
Right.
We see divisions, we see separations, we see families that aren't communicating. Well, communication is important.
Yeah.
So if you don't know how to communicate, then learn how to
Right,
communicate,
exactly.
right?
Yep.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I just have a few examples that we can touch on. One of them in what we were talking about with, if you have a blended family that's coming in, you have two parents that have for some time been, you know, single with their children. A lot of times when those dynamics come together, because, you know, with the psychology of a child, they basically had that parent to themselves for a very long time. And we need to be empathetic to the situation and understand that, hey, it's going to take some things that have to happen to change the mindset, you know? So those parts, we really do need to kind of hone in, and how can we look at this in a different way? And a situation like that, you know, when we come together as a husband and wife, maybe it's more important that we always take care of things as a unit, so that they see, hey, we were separated, you did have, you know, your parent by yourself for a while, but now this is our family dynamic. To, you know, start to incorporate those things. I think from a communication standpoint, we really need to understand those are the things that are important when we're sitting down to blend the families. Hey, what do you think the best way is going to be to kind of take on this challenge, right? Because just by sharing different dynamics, a lot of times one side can know their children more than the other side and can share, hey, this is how my daughter has always been, or this is how my son has always been. But we need to have that understanding with one another to really come to an agreement in how we're going to deal with it. Because just as we touched on last week, not every family dynamic is the same.
Same,
So
right.
you can't deal with it in the same way.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on, just on that?
Well, the way God designed us,
Right.
we all have, different fingerprints, right?
Yep.
So we
Personalities.
we have to look at that, and we have to go in, just like you're pointing out, you have to go in on the dynamics of your family and the way it's like a flavor that's there. That's your family flavor. And yes, you read information, you gather information. Oh, that's the best. I think that's the good word. You're gathering. Yeah, you're gathering information, and then what you're doing is you're siphoning through that, and you're figuring out, okay, this will work, that won't work. This will work.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's how you put everything together. And this way, God is looking at it, and He's happy because He sees that, hey, you're taking time out. That goes back to the scripture when it talks about dealing with a woman.
Yep.
You've got to deal with a woman with what? With knowledge, right? This will work for her. That won't work. So it's all about each family being individually, because each family has a different purpose.
Right.
You can't expect, you can't just model, let me just say it this way. I want to make sure I say this right. You're modeling your family off of a family that has, that's showing, I guess, the Anderson family, great family, but Pastor Tom, Dr. Tom and Dr. Maureen, they had to figure out at one point what worked for them. And at the same time, that's a model to follow. But at the same time, you have to be able to take those individual gifts and talents and everything and bring them together.
Right. Yep.
See, and you have to
God's purpose.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Because we're talking about blending a family together for the kingdom.
Right. Yes.
That's the key.
Yes, that is the key.
And a lot of blended families also deal with co-parenting. So that's another thing, is that why it's so important for our communication to be strong with one another, because a lot of times you are dealing with other situations outside of that. And like I said, when we're touching on some of these things, because not everybody has the best situations. When we're touching on these things, it really can get in there with some people, but these are the things that we do as the church want to talk about, because this is where the information should be going out when people do have questions. What is the best way to handle these situations? And that's where just in us talking about communication with one another and keeping things open, it really does relate to a lot of different topics when we talk about this. So that's really big. That's one of the biggest things that we're dealing with right now in this day and age, is co-parenting. And you see it in some couples that do very well at it. And then others, they struggle with it for a long time, and it really truly affects the children, in the end.
Right.
So.
And a lot has to do with culture. So all of these things factor in.
True.
Yeah.
Very, very true.
Yes.
So the last thing also we would like to kind of touch on as well, and this one's a little sticky as well, but we do need to make sure that, with the younger generation, we are creating this understanding within our marriage, because as we have a lot of families that are coming in with different dynamics and children happening out of wedlock, that's another thing that raises some complications moving forward, because as you get older, you have older children and with, different situations, all of that stuff matters. And all of those things we should be able to kind of speak on and address with some of these things. So do you guys have any questions or anything to?
Oh, I think you guys have did a fantastic job. And so we'll see you guys next week as we continue this journey.
Yes.
And we're gonna talk, this is raw,
Yes.
this is live. All right.
Amen.
God bless you.